As I stood in the almost empty classroom with only 2 other students, I realized that signing up randomly for whichever course was available might not have been my best choice. But, well, I didn't have much of a choice anyway. I scoffed at myself. 6 months. Just 6 months of this, and I could switch to something else. My mood lightened at the thought of the pizza waiting for me that night. As I stood there, the door opened, and a man walked in. He was well-dressed, with long curls cascading to his shoulders and a face so striking it was almost otherworldly. I hadn't seen anyone so beautiful in years. The sight of him stunned me. Without saying a word, he picked up a broken piece of chalk and wrote on the board, "Nice to meet you all. I'm Ron, your sculpting teacher." I blinked, startled. Teacher? For a moment, I thought he was a model or an artist on display himself. The other 2 students seemed unimpressed, sighing heavily, clearly disinterested. After the brief introduction, the class started. But it wasn't what I expected. Instead of working on anything hands-on, Ron played a video about the basics of sculpting and remained silent the entire time. And I spent more time looking at him than at the video. After the class, I learned the other 2 students were dropping out. I considered doing the same, but something about the quiet intrigue of the class and Ron made me decide to stay. Part of me felt bad for him too. If no one else stayed, would he lose his job? The next day, I was the only one in the classroom. It felt oddly intimate, the silence heavier than before. Ron walked up to me and handed me a piece of paper. "Are you sure you want to continue this class?" I smirked, thinking it was a test. But then I realized he couldn't speak. The knowledge hit me harder than it should have, and I immediately felt guilty for smirking. I nodded and said yes, half out of genuine interest, half out of pity. His eyes lingered on mine for a moment before he walked to the front and began the lesson. For weeks, it was just the 2 of us. He communicated only through notes, his instructions simple yet cryptic. My sculptures turned out strange, abstract forms that seemed to emerge from a place I didn't fully understand. They were detailed, almost grotesquely so, with expressions that felt too real. I didn't question it at first. Art is meant to evoke emotion, after all. One night after class, something changed. I lingered, examining the pieces I'd worked on. They felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl. The lights flickered, and the room seemed to shift. Shadows danced unnaturally on the walls, and I swore I heard whispers. And then, on the chalkboard, a message appeared, scratched in jagged letters. "Sculpt me." I stumbled back, my tools clattering to the floor. The sculptures around me seemed to move, just slightly, but enough to make my blood run cold. I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, until the lights snapped off completely. In the darkness, I felt them. Cold, stone-like hands brushing against me. The sound of grinding stone filled the air, and then a voice. Ron's voice, whispered directly into my mind. "Create me." The lights flickered back on, and everything was normal again. The sculptures were in their original places, and Ron walked in, his usual silent demeanor intact. He handed me another note. "Are you all right? You look pale. We'll end class early today. You don't seem well." I nodded, too shaken to argue. Outside the classroom, I noticed a poster on the notice board. It bore Ron's name and advertised an upcoming sculpting expedition. Was it the same, Ron? The description was vague, but it seemed likely. The next day I went to the exhibition, curious. The gallery was packed, the crowd buzzing with admiration for the sculptures on display. Each piece was hauntingly lifelike. A man mid-scream, a child crouched in fear, a woman crying bloody tears. The detail was astonishing, almost unsettling. And then I saw him, Ron. He was nothing like the reserved, quiet figure from class. Here, he was a star, surrounded by admirers, exuding charisma. I was shocked. He never once mentioned being so famous. One piece in particular caught my eye. A sculpture of a woman crying bloody tears. The sorrow and fear etched into her face were so vivid I felt compelled to touch it. My fingers brushed against its surface. It was warm. Before I could react, the figure crumbled under my touch. It wasn't stone. Flesh and blood spilled onto the floor, and the smell of decay filled the air. I stumbled back, horror clawing at my throat. And then everything went black. I woke up to darkness, my body stiff and cold. I tried to move, but I couldn't. My limbs refused to obey me. My chest burned and panic set in. I could see faintly the stage of the gallery, the dim lights casting shadows over a new centerpiece. It took me a moment to realize the centerpiece was me. I was frozen in place, my body contorted into a macabre pose. My hands reached out as if pleading, my face twisted in terror. The spectators marveled at my realism, their voices muffled in my ears. Truly a haunting, someone said. A tragic masterpiece, another murmured. I wanted to scream, to beg for help, but I couldn't. Ron appeared beside me, smiling faintly. He leaned in close, his voice soft and cold. Welcome to eternity. Thanks so much for making it to the end of this video. A quick thank you to my patrons: Mr. Sankofa, Austin My Love, Rinku Star, William Hartley, Cupcake Hips, Alonzo, Icy Narrates, and Jesse Hartley. I hope that everyone is having an amazing holiday. Don't forget the reason for the season. And on that note, if anybody has a prayer request, I would love to know how I can be praying for you. So go ahead and reach out to me on any of my socials, in the comments, over Instagram, anything. And also, if you're interested in becoming a patron, I have links in the description. But I also have links in the description for charities every now and then, or people who I think could really benefit from that. So if you are limited on money and you want to give to something, I'd much rather you give to them than to me, but it's ultimately up to you. Anyways, thank you guys so much, and I hope that you all have amazing, wonderful, happy holidays, and I'll see you in the next video.